Hi everybody, welcome to episode 5 of my Paul McCartney album ranking series. This is the last episode of the main album rankings because I will be going right back to 1970s McCartney here. But I'm going to do a further episode where I'm going to round up all the kind of live albums, classical albums and other sort of assorted projects that didn't make this list. And I'm going to put those into a ranking as well. So keep an eye out for that future video if that's of interest to you. So, last time, episode 4, we went back as far as Venus and Mars. Remember, I'm going back chronologically. We started with McCartney 3, working backwards chronologically, and as we go, slotting them into this ranking that's now starting to look pretty big, and slotting the albums in based on my enjoyment of them. That's the only criteria that I've got here, is my enjoyment. So, we've got a biggie to start off with here, because before Venus and Mars, of course, was Band on the Run. The album that really launched Wings into the stratosphere. They'd kind of built it up. I mean, obviously Paul McCartney is one of the most famous people in the world, but Wings itself, fairly humble beginnings with the first two albums, and then this was really enabled it to take off properly and then become the massive stadium rock band that they were in the mid-70s. What can you say about this album? I mean, it's one of the classic albums of the 1970s, without a doubt, let alone Paul McCartney. It is packed with absolute class pretty much from start to finish. That opening of Band on the Run, Jet, Bluebird is a 3-song opening. I think that's up there with 3-song openings of pretty much any album in history. There's not many better, I don't think. And it just continues all the way through to be great songs. Mrs. Vanderbilt is superb. Let Me Roll It, a song that Paul's still doing live to this day, with that fantastic guitar riff that's not too dissimilar to John Lennon's Cold Turkey. It was another one of their that little battle that they were having in the early 70s where messages were kind of being knocked backwards and forwards in music between them. Side 2, it doesn't get off to the start that side 1 gets off to, that's for certain, but it's still great songs. Mamounia, No Words, these are great songs. I've always had a little bit of an issue with No Words, and it took me a long time to realise what my issue was with it, because I never really enjoyed the song so much. And then it kind of dawned on me that it feels like it's on the wrong album, to me. If they'd have been on the previous album, Red Rose Speedway, I think it would have fitted so much better there. And once I'd got that in my mind, it allowed me to listen to the song more objectively. And I love the song a lot more now, but it still feels to me as though it feels a little bit out of place to me on this album. I always prefer Band on the Run without Helen Wheels, because for me, Paul McCartney, when he put the track listing for the album together, he didn't want Helen Wheels on it. It was something that was kind of forced on him in America by the record company over there. So I prefer my Band on the Run without Helen Wheels. Not that I don't think Helen Wheels is a great song, because it is. We then gone to Picasso's Last Words, Drink to Me. I love Paul's story that he tells about this particular song, where he'd been out for a meal with Dustin Hoffman, and Dustin was sort of asking him about how he wrote songs and could he just write a song to order. And Dustin brought a newspaper that mentioned that Picasso had just passed away, and Paul just started coming up with the song, and Dustin Hoffman was just going crazy about this. He thought it was amazing. And I like the little callback to Jet that they do in the song as well. We've then got 1985. Wow. To me, one of the greatest songs ever to close an album. It's up there with A Day in the Life on Sgt. Pepper for me as a stunning song to close an album with. Just the tension that the song builds up, the beat that it's got, the drive that it builds up to this explosive finish. Absolutely superb. I just wish that he hadn't put the little Band on the Run segment at the end, because to me, that always kind of detracts from it a little bit. Maybe that's just me that's bothered about that, but it always just brings the album down a touch for me at the end with that, because I just wish it wasn't there. Anyway, that's nitpicking of the highest order, because this is a superb album. I love the cover. The fact that he got this group of famous people together to shoot this album cover is superb for me. It was a massive seller, it hung around the charts for years, and it's probably no surprise that at this stage, Band on the Run is going to number 1 in my rankings. So it's going ahead of Flaming Pie and Tug of War. So basically I am saying that from Band on the Run onwards, I don't think he's ever bettered this album, or certainly not made an album that I enjoy more. We're then going back to Red Rose Speedway. Now, this to me is the ultimate Paul McCartney marijuana album. I think they must have just been so high when they made this. But I really enjoy this album. I think it gets off to a great start with Big Barn Bed. I think that's just a classic Wings pop song of the era. My Love, of course, well, what a beautiful song My Love is. Of course, there's the famous story about the guitar solo. Henry McCulloch just kind of said to Paul, I've got an idea for the guitar solo, can I go with it? Paul had got something exact worked out. Henry came in with something that was just absolutely perfect, and probably the best known guitar solo of a Paul McCartney's 1970s song, potentially, but a classic song. We then come to Get on the Right Thing, which I absolutely adore this song. This is one of those songs that I think, had it been a Beatles song, it would be regarded as a classic. But it probably gets overlooked a little by being a non-single track 3 on a Wings album. I think it's absolutely superb. I think if Get on the Right Thing was on side A of Abbey Road would be an even better album than it already is. Again, maybe just my opinion, but I think that is a sensational song. We don't have far to go until we find another sensational song on this album, and that's Little Lamb Dragonfly. It was left over from the Ram sessions and eventually used for Red Rose Speedway, and I think it was just sort of kind of tweaked a bit for these sessions, but absolutely gorgeous song. Paul had talked about it being his song about where one of the lambs had been born on his farm and it was clearly struggling, and it was kind of Paul singing to this lamb about, I'm trying to help you out. Might not be able to make it, but here we go. But it's absolutely beautiful song. Definitely one of my favourite 1970s Paul McCartney songs, without a doubt. It's then kind of okay for a little while. I like Single Pigeon. I think it's a good song without ever going to be... it's never going to blow me away. When the Night, and then on to the medley. The medley's good. I think he's obviously done a better medley. In the past, going back to Abbey Road, although of course that wasn't all him, but I think it's a good medley. It sounds so Pink Floyd in places, as well does the medley, which is quite interesting. I think it's a good ending to the album. Lazy Dynamite and Hands of Love, it sort of brings it up to a very uplifting ending. So it's a really enjoyable album for me as Red Rose Speedway, and at the moment I'm going to put it, based purely on how much I enjoy listening to it, I'm putting it in 6th place at the moment. So it's just behind Egypt Station, but above Chaos and Creation. And that's a compliment to the album, because Chaos and Creation is a great album, but I would probably enjoy this slightly more. We then go back to the first Wings album, Wildlife. Now, this is an interesting album. Some people never know. Some people really hate this album. Some people love this album. It took me a little while to get my head around this, and I think if I was ranking this purely in terms of what do I think are his best albums, what contain his best songs and his best performances, and which are his biggest artistic statements, I'm probably never going to rank this particularly highly. But remember, this is about how much I enjoy listening to the album. And I monumentally enjoy listening to this album. I really do, despite the fact that it feels a bit rushed. It feels a little bit half-baked. Some of the songs could have done with some more work. The absolute balls of this man to start the band that he is following the Beatles with Mumbo and Bit Bop. That is... that just kind of blows my mind when I think about the fact that, he didn't want to come in with another Maybe I'm Amazed that he'd done before. He didn't want to come in with sort of like Backseat of My Car that had finished the previous album. No, he comes in with Mumbo and Bit Bop to announce Wings on the world stage. That is either really brave or really stupid. I'm going to go with really brave, I think. But they're obviously nothing songs, both of them. But they're pretty enjoyable. I like them to kick off the album. Love is Strange, a cover of an old song that I think came from the 1950s. Enjoyable. They've done it in kind of a reggae style, and I do enjoy that. Wildlife, the title track. Is this Paul's first kind of environmental song? I think it probably is. And really good performance on that. I like the sort of passion that he has in the way that he sings it. I like the performance from the band. It's a real good production as well. Everything's got its own place in that soundstage and sounds like a band performing a live song that they really mean it. So I think that's a really enjoyable song. Some People Never Know, next, is a song that for some reason about 3 years ago I just got obsessed with. Even I was over in America, and all that was going through my brain while I was spending 3 days in New York was Some People Never Know. Why? I don't know, but this song has really got in here for me. I love what Linda was doing in the early days of Wings, especially kind of Wildlife, Red Rose Speedway, and probably no more so than on Some People Never Know. I love the harmonies that she brings. Obviously, she's not a fantastic singer. She wasn't great. Paul could have brought in some superstar backing vocalist, or he could have brought in some sort of famous singer who had a much, in theory, better voice to do backing. You know, he could have brought in Mary Hopkin or somebody, but no, he wanted his wife there. He wanted Linda there, and it just gels perfectly. I love that song. I'm Your Singer is okay. It's decent, but again, I like what Linda does on this. It brings a kind of a homey quality to it, which I really like. Tomorrow is probably the most polished pop song on the album. I think it comes across that way to me anyway. And if there was going to be a big hit single from this, then I think Tomorrow would have been it. Dear Friend at the end. Wow. This is Paul's ode to John. You know, is this it? Everything that we've been through? Are we done? Is it finished? It's heartbreaking to listen to. But fantastic performance. The demos that are in the archive collection version of Wildlife, where you can hear that he's just sat in his house, kids are running around, and some of the notes that he hits on the song are just absolutely superb. So it's a really interesting song to listen to, just about this fact that, you know, of me and John, have we reached the end of the line? You know, we went through everything together, but is that it now? Are we done? Absolutely heartbreaking. So like I say, if I was ranking this based on what an artistic production it is and how great all the songs are, it would be probably quite low down. But how much do I enjoy this album? Well, I really enjoy this album. I can't quite put it above Venus and Mars. So at the moment it is going into 5th place in my Paul McCartney album ranking, just below Egypt Station. And for me, it is fully deserving of that place there. We have got 2 more albums to go. So next up, it is Ram, officially credited to Paul and Linda McCartney. That caused some hoo-ha a few years later, because of course Paul was his money was tied up in Apple, and with court cases that were going on, he was struggling to get access to money. But by naming it, crediting it to Paul and Linda McCartney, Linda wasn't bound by those rules, and they could get half the money for the album when it sold. Clever. But anyway, what do we think about this album? Or what do I think about this album? Amazing. Absolutely amazing album. I love this album, and I seem to love this album more as time goes on. I first got to know this album in about 1990, and I've kind of loved it a little bit more every year ever since. And that doesn't really show any signs of slowing down, to be honest. If I was to pick out my highlights on this, Three Legs is a good fun song. Ram On, lovely little ukulele ditty, but just built up to something kind of a lot bigger. It could have been just him and ukulele, and it would have been a fun little thing, but he makes it something much bigger. Dear Boy, well, Dear Boy to me is kind of as close as Paul McCartney has ever got to Brian Wilson level of production. If we think about what Brian Wilson was doing around the kind of Pet Sounds era and onto Smile, Dear Boy, there is just so much going on in this song. It is incredibly complex. Sometimes it takes headphones to really pick everything out, but that to me is I can pay it no higher compliment than saying it is Brian Wilson level of production. Absolutely stunning song. We've then got Uncle Albert Admiral Halsey. So one of Paul's great songs that he's done a few times over the years, where he'll mash a couple of different songs together and build something superb out of it. And it's a great pop song of its era. I absolutely love Uncle Albert Admiral Halsey. Smile Away's a good rocker, not going to be one of my highlights on the album. Heart of the Country, fantastic. The way that Paul sings that and plays guitar at the same time, matching the melody of his singing on the guitar, fantastic. He's got little jazzy interludes, ba-doo-ba-doo-ba-doo-ba-doo, brilliant. It's just a really fun song that sums up Paul McCartney living up in Scotland on his farm in the early 1970s. Monkberry Moon Delight, I mean, flipping heck, we've not even got to that yet. What a song that is. I really wish that during the 70s, in his peak as a live performer, that he'd been doing Monkberry Moon Delight live, because imagine that on Wings Over America. That would be sensational. Absolutely crazy song, crazy lyrics, but the way that he delivers it is absolutely fantastic. The next two songs, Eat at Home and Long Haired Lady, are two that I kind of thought for a while were maybe the weaker points on the album, but I realise now that that's nonsense. They are up there with everything else that's on it. They are two great songs, and again, there's so much going on in those songs that maybe is not obvious all the time, but when you sort of really listen closely, there's so much going on there with some of the guitar picking that's on them, or some of the harmonies that are in there on Long Haired Lady. Fantastic. And the last proper song on here, the last song on here, The Backseat of My Car, is, again, it's Beach Boys Paul. I think Brian Wilson would have loved Backseat of My Car. It's a sensationally good song that, again, I think gets criminally overlooked. You stop a random person on the street who isn't a Beatles fan or a Paul McCartney fan, they're not going to know that song. But it's Beatles level. Again, if it had been on Abbey Road, it would be hailed as a classic and would fit absolutely perfectly on an album like that. So this album, I cannot praise it highly enough. It's one of my favourite albums of all time. So it's going to be no surprise that it goes to number one in my ranking at the moment. Band on the Run didn't stay number one for long. It's been pushed down. So I am saying effectively that from the point of Ram onwards, I don't think he has ever made an album ever since that I enjoy more than Ram. We're now down to the final album in this ranking, McCartney from 1970. So much of this album was recorded while Paul was still a Beatle, so it's got massive historic value just for that fact alone. It was recorded in various places. Some of it was recorded at his home. It had a studio, a recording desk delivered to his home that he recorded some of the album on, and the lovely Linda is literally him just switching the tape recorder on and just testing that it works. Some of it was recorded at Abbey Road, some of it was recorded at Morgan Studios. So you do sort of tend to find that it's got, some of the songs are a little bit more polished than others because of how and when they were recorded and where they were recorded. So if I was going to pick my highlights out from this album, I think that would be Something is a really, really good early McCartney song that's very enjoyable. Every Night is a classic. It's Paul sort of basically lamenting his own mental health, really, about the sort of the Beatles coming towards an end, and he's really pouring his heart out on that song, more than he ever had done, and possibly more than he ever has done since in song. So that is a classic, and one that stands up with most early McCartney solo stuff, I think. We've then got little bits of fragments, Hot as Sunglasses. Junk is a lovely little acoustic song that he'd been playing with the Beatles a couple of years earlier. Eventually managed to get it out here. You can see that it would have fitted on the White Album. It certainly wouldn't have been out of place on there. Man We Was Lonely. I often wondered whether is this one of the songs that Paul had intended for somebody else, because it doesn't really feel to me like one of his kind of songs. I could imagine him giving that to somebody like Mary Hopkin. I actually sent a tweet to Mary Hopkin a few months ago asking her this. Mary, do you know if Man We Was Lonely was originally intended for you? Because it just felt to me like it could have been. And she replied, did Mary, sort of saying, well, not that she was ever aware of. So that put to bed that theory anyway. We get to the start of side 2, and again it's kind of little fragments. It's Paul just sort of doing instrumentals, little sort of almost half-baked things, but I really, really love the start of side 2. Ooh You and Mama Miss America. Absolutely, I don't enjoy much in music more than I enjoy listening to the start of the second side of this album. As weird as that may sound, I really love those two. Teddy Boy, okay, played it with the Beatles. I don't think he was ever going to get that one past John Lennon, but now freed from that constraint, he was able to put it on this album, and it's a good little fun ditty, but probably better served on this album than it would have been on a Beatles album, I think. Sing Along a Junk. Okay, fair enough. He's done an instrumental version of a song that's earlier on the album. Okay, fair enough. But then we go on to Maybe I'm Amazed. What I feel about Maybe I'm Amazed is, to me, the single greatest song that Paul McCartney has ever recorded in his entire career, and I'm including the Beatles in that. I think if someone was to say to me, you know, play me a song that encompasses Paul McCartney in one song, it's Maybe I'm Amazed. Like everything else on the album, it's just him playing it. You know, it's him on drums, it's him on piano, he's on bass, he's on guitar, he's on electric guitar, he's doing everything's him, and he's also singing about his favourite subject matter in the world, Linda. And to me, it is the greatest thing he's ever done, and it will take some convincing to get me to think otherwise, to be honest. And then he does what Paul McCartney does from time to time. He does something baffling. So he's got Crina Crore at the end. He'd seen a documentary about tribes living in the Amazon rainforest, and that was the tribe's name. And he put together this, what essentially is a drum beat, basically, with a bit of heavy breathing over the top of it, a little bit of electric guitar now and again, a little bit of Paul making some animal noises on. And I love it. I really, really enjoy Crina Crore at the end of this album. Again, it's another one of those that some people probably think he's on a par with Revolution 9 at the end of the White Album. You know, spoils the album at the end. I don't agree with that at all. I love Crina Crore at the end of this. I think it just adds up to the whole homely feeling of the album. So where am I going to rank this? Well, I had a bit of a job playing around with this and deciding where I was going to put it. But in the end, purely in terms of enjoyment, remember that's what we're talking about here, I could think of no other place to put it than number 3. It's going just below Band on the Run and just above Flaming Pie. I did have Flaming Pie above it for a while, and then I thought, no, I've got to put this above it. So it's going in 3rd place. So I can now show you, because we're done, this is the full ranking in order from bottom right up to the top of Paul McCartney studio albums. Like I said, I'm going to be doing at least one more video on this subject, where I'm going to be bringing in all the live, classical and other sort of side projects that he's done over the years and doing a ranking similar to this for those. So please stick around for that. That will be coming pretty soon. But as always, let me know your comments about these rankings. I hope you have enjoyed this series of 5 videos that I've done. I've certainly enjoyed bringing them to you, and I've enjoyed the feedback that you've given me on them. So thank you very much for watching. I will see you again very soon. Cheers. Bye-bye.